Welcome to J Lowe Artist YouTube channel. Today we'll be doing some drawing with graphite. So get out your pencils, your cotton swab, kneaded eraser, anything that you think you need to draw with. Have it right handy. And let's draw together. Remember, art makes life better. And thank you for being here. Drawing with graphite is probably one of the easier things to do because graphite is readily available. You can always find a pencil somewhere. You do want to have your 6B pencil standing by. That's your darkest pencil, or one of your darker pencils. And so in order to get the shading and the contrast and things like that, you want to have that close by. Your kneaded eraser. And then, of course, a cotton swab for blending. You could use tortillas. You can use anything you want to blend as long as it, smears it around. But I like the cotton swabs. So we're going to start with the number 2 pencil. And the first thing we need is our basically where we're going to put everything, our composition. I've kind of cropped this picture down. I want to give him a little bit of room on the bottom so you can say to yourself, okay, I want his foot to go there. And up at the top, maybe you want his hand to go right up kind of into the corner there, maybe up in there. And then start making like a stick figure. Start with his arm coming down. And try to get the angle that you see up there, kind of that almost 45-degree angle there. And then his body, how much of that space is going to be his body? And right now, you're just kind of guessing. We're going to adjust it a little bit as we go. So we're just kind of throwing in some lines to just kind of help us to figure out where everything goes. His hand is just a little bit further than his knee is. If you go on the vertical, his knee is about right here and his hand is just slightly over it. His leg is foreshortened, and so you have to kind of say, well, okay, his knee up here is kind of right in the middle, and it kind of curves down to the foot down in here. Okay, nothing here is perfect. Okay, we're just adjusting everything. His head is this kind of oval, and into his shoulder a little bit is where his chin goes. So down in there, and then his head is somewhere up and around there. Just this little oval. And you adjust it, until it's right. Remember, don't erase until you've got it right, and then you can erase. If you erase first, like you draw it and you can tell, oh, that's not right. You erase it, you lose your point of reference. Don't erase until you've got it pretty close to being about right. Once you get your stick figure kind of thing done, then you can start adding some thickness to things, thickness to the arms. Maybe that head might be a little bit on the big side. Now, if you think about this, between the shoulder and the elbow is about the same size as the head. So if you take your head, and if your head size looks pretty good, you can start using that head size to figure out where everything's going to go. You use your fingers kind of like calipers. You know what calipers are? They're little metal pieces on it, usually on a spring or on a little screw thing, and you can adjust it big and small. Engineers use them to, well, artists use them to compare things. Then just start adding some thickness to it with the side of your pencil. Are you drawing on the side of your pencil like this? If you're drawing like this, it's too slow. And you're grinding it into the surface. You're never going to get rid of those lines. So remember, draw with the side of your pencil. It's a lot quicker, a lot faster. And all I'm doing now is I'm just looking at my picture, trying to get the proportions correct. Line up things like knees to chest. Look how his chest, if his chest is down here, his knee is almost level with the with his little spider that's right here. That knee is almost level. So that's what you're looking for. You're looking to line up things. And if you need to use your kneaded eraser, because you're starting to get confused with all your lines, that kneaded eraser should take out anything that's there because we're using the side of our pencil. Again, if we use the tip of our pencil, it's going to grind it into the surface. And the more you practice this, the better. You'll get so much better, so much faster. Hands are a good thing to practice. You kind of start out with a mitten, if you think. You put all your fingers together, even if they're separated a little bit, put them together in like a little mitten form. That's how you kind of start out. And then you can adjust. You just keep adjusting and adjusting until it looks about right. And don't worry about too much about erasing because we've got to smear some of this anyway. There's some value to his outfit, that red and that blue. You guys know what foreshortening is? Yeah, it's where your limbs, your legs, your arms, whatever, kind of go away from you into space, and so they look kind of shortened. That's kind of what that means. And so his leg here is foreshortened. His hand, his fingers are foreshortened. Once you have your proportioning about the way you want it, and if you think about this, the size of your head, is compared to everything from your head to your chest to the center and your legs. Their legs are about 1.5 heads. Arms are about 1 head. So you can just kind of use your fingers like that and kind of get some fairly good proportioning done that way. Again, nothing is ever perfect, but you do want to get it as close as you can. And you just keep adding in detail. You can add in some of the little stripes that are along his shirt. And notice we haven't really drawn a heavy line around anything yet. I know you want to get to that as soon as you can, but avoid that for now. We can always go back and add more later. There's been so many incarnations of Spider-Man, I don't even know which one this one is. Some of you might, though. You're big Spidey fans. The more you draw people, the more you know what to expect. So I would say, any chance you get to practice drawing people, take that. And this preliminary kind of drawing that we've just done, most of the time you should kind of push yourself and do it as fast as you possibly can, because it's just preliminary stuff. You got to get your reference first. So once you get it down on the page, then you go, okay, I need to go bigger or smaller, or adjust it somehow. I'm using my kneaded eraser here to just adjust my edges a little bit so that they're not quite as sketchy. If we had done lines first, then we couldn't fix it. This would be set in paper. And you all know what I'm talking about. You've done it before. So now I'm just adjusting my edges. And when I'm done, I can come back in and do some more detail in there, more edges, harder edges, more contrast. I'm going to add just a little bit more muscle to the guy, just because Stan Lee would have liked me to. How about that? So a little more bicep, a little more tricep, a little more deltoids. A little more of his latissimus dorsi back in there, lats. Any good comic superhero artist kind of knows how to do those things. I'm going to add a little more pectoralis major there too. Give him a little more hourglass shape to his body. A lot of people don't really look that way, but in comics you kind of want to accentuate that a little bit more. Even your flexor extensors, these little muscles that are on your arms here, you want to increase those just a little bit, make his arm a little thicker up towards the elbow, a little thinner towards the wrist. That gives it a little more of that superhero look. And it really doesn't take much. Anytime they do movie stills, there's probably an artist that goes back over their photographs and changes all that. I'm not really drawing fingers or anything. For the hand, I'm just trying to get the outer edge to be about right. So I'm looking at the little bumps where the fingers go. This is another one of those things that you can actually change and make it. Usually the fingers get a little thinner. These guys are wearing gloves, and that kind of thickens out your fingers a little bit. So you can thin them out a little bit, make them look a little more Marvel comic-y. You're not stuck to your reference, by the way. So I know you're trying to make it exactly like the photograph. You guys having a hard time erasing? You shouldn't. I mean, if you're having a hard time, it's because you're doing this too soon. Okay, this is what you do towards the end. Okay, so if you continue on like this, sometimes I'll hold my pencil way back here like this because then I can't draw heavy. And I'm just using my eraser to define the edges. Feet are another thing that's kind of difficult to do. So he's wearing these little booty things, and which is nice because then you don't have to worry about your toes or anything like that. And you may want to add something towards the back just so everybody knows he's kind of on the vertical. I don't know. I don't like this building going from his shoulder up. It's kind of an odd angle. So I think what I'm going to do is kind of continue that up a little bit and then maybe drop something down. Something like that. I mean, I just don't like that dark shape hitting his shoulder. But that's a kind of an aesthetically compositional thing, and it's totally up to you. I'm going to just continue that edge all the way through the bottom. And I kind of like the little buildings in the background. They kind of give it that idea that, hey, we're way up above everybody. So if you wanted to do some background kinds of buildings, keep it very light and soft though. Don't do hard edges around those background buildings. So then I'm still using the side of my pencil to do some shading. And this is still that number 2 pencil. We haven't gotten really dark yet. That will come. I'm not worried about like the patterns and stuff in his outfit. I'm just worried about some of the darkness that's in there. Even his little spider symbol. Not quite worried about that. But everything has to have a little bit of value to it. And you want to kind of pick and choose what you make lighter and darker. Like he's got some highlights on his arm, on his shoulder, on his neck over here, on this shoulder. I may want to lighten those up a little bit. He's even got a real strong highlight over here. And so I may want to just leave those a little bit lighter than what I see them, just to increase some contrast a little bit. So define your edges with your kneaded eraser, because once we switch over to that 6B pencil, everything is going to be very dark. If you're happy with the proportions that you get, then you're ready to do a little bit of smearing, a little bit of adjusting. And you can use your finger if you wanted to. I just don't like getting graphite on my fingers. So I'm going to use this cotton swab. And I'm just going to go in and just start doing a little blending with that cotton swab. And softening some of those edges. And it's still light enough that I can use my kneaded eraser there. Some of these edges that are very, very light, you can go in there and you can even break them a little bit. So if I came in and just broke that edge a little bit, just so that you can see a little bit here and a little bit there, but that top part, I take it out completely. It just gives it a little softer, nicer edge. Sometimes you like that, sometimes you don't. So as an artist, again, you get to pick and choose. How much of that, what part of that do I leave out? You can do little circles. You can just do back and forth. Uh, it's kind of up to you what you do there. His eyes are very bright, but there's still a little bit of value in them. So you can take your cotton swab instead of trying to put graphite in there. Just take your cotton swab. You've loaded some on it. It's kind of gray there. And you can just go in and just put a little edge in there, just a little bit. You have to do a lot. And some of those darker shadows that are around, once you load that a little bit of that cotton swab with this graphite, you can draw with it. Even those buildings that are in the background, if you wanted to, you could come in and just draw with the cotton swab. And that would leave those nice and soft and fuzzy. You don't want sharp edges around anything that's in the background because backgrounds are denoted by atmospheric perspective. In other words, there's air and moisture and pollution and things in between you and the object. And so your contrast, your edges go away. So in order to make it look like it's in the background, you want to keep it soft and fuzzy. And some of these buildings, I mean, you could just draw some very soft buildings way far away with the cotton swab. And they look like they're detailed when they really aren't. I don't know where he is, but there's some mountains back in there, which probably denotes he's probably in California or up in Vancouver. I don't know. What's our mythical city where Spider-Man is? I use my kneaded eraser to create that edge of his leg. I'm almost ready to use my dark pencil. That's going to give us the contrast we want. We can also do our details with it. When you're ready, you can go ahead and shift over to that 6B pencil, and that's going to lock in your darks, your contrast. And we can also pick up more graphite with our 6B. I always start with the emphasis areas when I'm really going in and getting the details. Eyes, nose, mouth, you don't see much of that here, but the eyes, you kind of do. So I'm going to just go in here. If you have trouble putting your hand on the paper and smearing it, try taking a piece of tracing paper, putting it down, and then put your hand on the tracing paper. That's one way to do it. The other way is I like to maybe put my little finger down like this. Sometimes I'll get a little bit on my finger, but I'll put my finger on, then I'm not resting my hand against the drawing. So here I'm just going to now go in and just using the tip of my pencil, I'm doing the detail mode. I'm just going to do some of the more important details. Very iconographic eye shapes on his little outfit. See how that just makes that pop? That's what that contrast will do for you. It really makes it punch. Use my kneaded eraser to pull out any light areas that I want to. There's little edges that are darker and edges that are lighter. Keep those darker edges dark, but the light edges, you can lose them completely in places and still be okay. These contour lines help define the edges of his uniform too. Put some of those in there. And as they curve around his head, his body. It makes it interesting. And they don't have to be real tight. You can kind of smear through them. There's a little light edge on his chin that defines where his head goes. You just put your kneaded eraser into a little knife blade. Just go in and just touch that little area. That will help define that little edge. And if you don't get those little lines in exactly the same places that you see them on the scrap, that's okay. Don't have to. I'm enhancing these shadows a little bit. You can go in, you can smear those out. You can take your cotton swab. You can even go over some of those little lines that we just put in there with your cotton swab and smear those around. That 6B graphite is going to smear a lot easier than the 2B does, or the HB. So you can now use those lines a little bit. Kind of smear those around. Add some of that to it. So your grays are going to even look a little more dynamic, a little grayer, a little nicer. And at this point, if you think, oh, that I just went too dark, take your kneaded eraser and just touch that area and it'll come right back out. So like right here on his shoulder, some of this gray is just a little too dark. So I'm just going to take my kneaded eraser, pinch it down to a little blade, a little point, and just touch it. You don't rub it, you just touch it. And that little bit of that eraser will suck it right out. See how dynamic that head becomes, where you're not drawing a line all the way around. Leave some things out. So again, as I go around the outside edges of him, I'm going to try to get some of those darker edges, and then where they turn light, just stop. It's okay to break edges. It's okay to not have those in there. And if you wanted to change his outfit to one that is more in keeping with the comic book, or in, a different version of Spider-Man, more than welcome to. Or you just see what happens with this one. I usually go left to right when I detail like this, just because then I smear less. Again, if you have a really hard time with that, grab a piece of tracing paper, just lay it over the top, put your hand on it, then you won't smear it as easily. So see how all that contrast, that really dark, is making him come forward, making him pop, and all that stuff we did in the background is going to the back. That's what we want. We want him to come forward and the rest of that to go back. It's a little hard to see some of this stuff, so you just kind of guess, for lack of a better way to say it. Educated guess, you know what the body does. That just takes practice. The more you practice, the better you'll be at it. Did you guys ever hear Stan Lee talk about how Spider-Man was developed? That he went to his publisher and said, "Hey, you know what? They're talking about having superheroes have weaknesses." He's like, "We should make our superhero be like a high school kid, kind of a goofy, you know." And his publisher's like, "No, that's stupid." They ended up doing it anyway and was more successful than all the others. Who would have thought? So I'm going to do a little more smearing, pick up some of that really dark edge stuff. Once you load your graphite onto your cotton swab, you may want to keep that around a little while because it takes so long to load all that graphite on there. So I keep these cotton swabs in my little Altoids box. And I'll put my little cotton swabs in there. Then when you need them, they're already loaded. They're already there. Sometimes, like, he's got a little bit of texture on that outfit right there. And so everybody says, "Well, how do you do that texture?" Well, it's kind of subliminal. You want to just define it in the easiest way possible. So what I would do is I'd blend it a little bit like this, and then go back in with your kneaded eraser. Hook your kneaded eraser to a little point, And then just pull out some of those little areas. You don't have to do it everywhere, just here and there. That gives it that little kind of textural feel to it. I can bring some of that dark area from here down into like his chest right there. Define that pectoralis major there. Fingers are another thing you want to simplify. Just look at the shape of things, like fingers especially. A lot of people have a hard time drawing hands because I think they're looking at them a little too closely. I don't know. You kind of got to just look at the outside shape, do the outside shape, and kind of forget it. Almost simplify them. All these fingers kind of blend together there, and nothing wrong with just letting them blend together. Take your cotton swab, go back over them. Leave a little bit of light here and there. You got it. Piece of cake. That edge across the top of his leg, it's defined by that tracing in the window. Stained glass windows is called tracing, but it's not a stained glass window, so I don't know what it is. But that kind of defines all that edge. If you don't want to put that in, you don't have to. Well, we're getting close to the end here. Hopefully, you've learned something. Hopefully, you've had fun doing this. In any case, it's good practice. And it's always good to draw with somebody who has a different style or a different technique than you've been used to. Life is all about incorporating things into your own personality, into your own skill sets. Maybe somebody else has already developed. The last thing you want to do with this is to sign it. However you sign it's going to be up to you. Pick a place that's not too intrusive, that is, you know, your signature is part of your design. So pick a place that has a nice area for the design. For me, it would either be on this side or over here across these buildings. It's kind of, I like the buildings by themselves, so I think I'd sign it over here. Last thing you want to do too is clean up any smudges, any areas that you think need to be cleaned, any edges. Thanks again. I hope you have a lovely day. Hopefully art has made your life a little bit better today, because art makes life better.